Hi, I am Madam Eileen. We're going to cover stencils today. They go hand in hand with sponges and putting designs on the face very quickly. Here are some these are some stencils that I have. Snowflakes, dots of different sizes. You will find that there's like hundreds of stencils you can choose. But the ones I use the most frequently are the snowflakes, the dots, and on animal textures, I use most often the reptile and the snake. I have tired treads, dragon. I'm not as impressed with the dragon. These add elegance to any design. Honeycombs, that's just fun. Giraffe spots. But animal textures, you're going to use a lot of animal textures in your designs. And I have pirate. I have single pirates, a big pirate, music notes. You can use up a lot of money on stencils that you might never use in the design because the child never requests it. But they're fun to have on hand. Going to a music festival, sponge on a split cake color across the cheek, give it a second to dry, put this on the cheek, stencil, pick away, and there you go, a very fast design you can do in 1 minute. The longest time is the time it takes for the water to dry. So just keep practicing your sponges so you get the trick of putting just the right amount of water to get all the color spread, but that it dries quickly on the skin. The more water on your sponge, the longer it's going to take to dry. So sometimes I have a fan, a little open up handheld fan, and I fan my kid. If that's too much work for you, you might want to have a fan on the side of your table. So while you're painting, that breeze is constantly blowing across and evaporating the paint really quick. Now I'm going to show you how I apply these. You can use a regular sponge, but regular sponges can pick up a lot of water. Look how big they are. These are designed to pick up a lot of water. So you want to use something small. That's why I found finger daubers make the best. If you put too much water on your sponge, even finger daubers can pick up too much water. If you have too much water, then when you push down against the stencil, the liquid in the sponge is going to go underneath and bleed under the stencil and just make a huge mess. So the best way to describe how much water and paint to get on the stencil is you want to spray the paint, not the sponge, and pick up just that little bit of paint. And we're going to go down to our workstation and I'm going to show you. We're going to start with basically white. Remember, you're going to use white more than any other color. First is white and then black. So when you order your paint, go ahead and order a big giant container of white. You're going to use it. And black. All the other colors, you're not going to go through as fast. All right, we're going to go down to my workstation. We're going to go down. We're going to flip around. I hope you find that fun and not too annoying. All right. You can see I did have some black paint flick off into my white paint. I'm going to have to take care of that at some point. You can get tweezers or try to grab it with your fingers, but you will leave behind some black. Or you can take cleaning tissue and pull it out. You can see it's starting to gray. And so I'm losing a tiny bit of paint, but you're going to buy a lot of white, so it's all right. So I'm going to take my finger dauber. I'm going to give one spray onto my white paint, and I'm going to pull my finger dauber across. I'm going to hold it sideways. I'm going to pull it across, maybe pat it, and you're going to feel it stick. When you go to slide your dauber across, you're going to feel a thickness. It's not going to want to slide. It's going to start feeling sticky. I pounce it up and down at that point, and that means the paint on my finger dauber should be perfect. I test it on my skin to see if it's too wet by pushing it down and up. And if it's not too wet and shiny, it's going to work perfect. You want to work with dry to sticky paint on your sponge. Now we need a painted surface. Do you remember when we made these snakes? You could outline these snakes and call it done, or you can step it up a notch. I'm going to step it up by getting this stencil. Now, different people make stencils. This particular stencil is made by BAM, B-A-M. That stands for Badass Stencil Company. And you can see the stencil number, 1005. Now, some stencils are not so kind as to telling you who they are. But the good brand, like here's my skull and crossbones. This one is called, can't quite make it out. Is it fun? It's called something real stencils. Maybe you can make that out better than me. But if you go to some of the face paint companies that I listed in a link, Just Paint or Silly Farm, just look up face paint stencils and they will show you a whole bunch. Now I'm going to lay my stencil here on the snake, and I'm going to go large to small on the head. I'm going to push down and lift up. Light pressure will make a light stencil, heavy pressure, heavy. And now I've just added some extra texture. You could use black, you could use a dark green if you want to blend this. I'm going to continue. Different parts of the body, I'm going to move it, change the angle, stencil there, change the angle. On a snake, the scales on the back are bigger than the scales going towards the tummy. You don't want to over stencil or your snake starts looking funny. I have fish scales here. What if I wanted to just a few scales here? Treat them like highlights. Not a lot, just a few here, a few there, enough to suggest your stencil. And that's how you can accent a design. Can you imagine what a giraffe will look like? Now I'm going to get my black on my split cake. There's even a stencil with tiger stripes. If you are not good at your brush, there are face painters who use nothing but stencils in their artwork. They sponge on the color, then they stencil on top of that color. Using a combination of thin to thick lines, you could trace the head, make out a little tongue, a dot, and a curved line, like a comma, an upside down comma. That's all you need for that. just trace. That's all I'm doing. Just tracing my snake a little bit. And I want to add some stripes to my snake. So I'm going to lay my brush down sideways on its flat edge. I'm going to pull in and I'm going to pick it up onto its tippy toe. Flat, lay it down, pick it up on its tippy toe. And you can see, you can paint over what you just stenciled and it becomes a part of the design. And this is one way you can use to make a really cool snake. We're going to go ahead and do this one. I'm going to do a little squiggle line, and I'm going to make it more like a person's eye. And I can do thin to thick to thin and flick in, thin to thick to thin, flick in, quick little curve. Now I'm going to go thin, thick to thin, flicking it in. Remember, thin to thick as you do lines. Make sure you're doing some thin, some thick, and try to get thin again as you're traveling. That makes for a pleasing eye. People's eyes will look at that and they'll just like the design. They might not know what they like about it, but just it's a subtle trick of the eye. Eyes like to follow lines. So this is how I apply stencils to a design. We're going to look at another design. We're going to bring back our pirate princess here. This time she's sporting red on her face. You can see my side table here, the little boy. Okay, so we need our stencil. So we're going to get the white and we're going to load it up again. By this point, if I try to stencil, you'll see it's dry. You can try spraying. I'll spray it with water, pounce on another already white spot, and see how much white paint is still on there. Faint, it's not as thick as I wanted. So let's give a spray onto the white, rub it around, stipple it up and down to pick up the pigment. These finger daubers really helped me do better at stencils because I was always struggling with getting the right, I was struggling with getting too much water all the time in my sponges, and my designs were not appealing at all. So I am going to flip around to my giant skull and crossbones. So I used a sponge and my fire split cake. Trying to see if I can find it real quick. I did something with it. Oh. So I used the sponge to lay the color across. I let it dry. Now I'm going to lay down my stencil. I'm going to adjust the camera angle just like this. And I'm going to go up and down. Light pressure is good. Light pressure helps you know if it's coming off good. And then just put your pressure just a little heavier. Pounce it up and down. Now, as on a large stencil, orange is going to start creeping up onto your stencil. So you don't want to pounce too often or else you start picking up the color from underneath. I can rub this in my paint one more time to help get some white and put that down. But once that paint starts getting wet, that color is going to start lifting through. So you don't want to spend too time going up and down with your your finger dauber, or else that paint from underneath is going to start coming up. Then when I lift the stencil off, you can see where I've had some bleed through, where I got it too wet. But it is a bandana. All I have to do to cover up that spot is to do a line across that mouth area there, and it's covered up. I'm going to clean this off later. I'm going to get one more. When you buy your finger daubers, sometimes you can buy them in a kit. This kit has a nice lid, and some artists dedicate a sponge specifically to a color. Like this would be white, this would be blue. So if they need a stencil in blue, they'll take out the blue one, put it on their finger, and use that in only blue. They'll wash and clean these off, but there's always that paint will stain, and so it becomes tinged with that color. So you can dedicate it. Now, once you paint a child's skin with paint there and the paint dries, you're no longer painting on skin, you're painting on paint. So you don't have to worry about contaminating your paints with bacteria because the bacteria has been sealed by that layer. But it's still a good idea to rinse and wash these off or use a new one for each child. To be hygienic, what I do is after I use this on a child, I don't re-put this in my paint. If I put this on a person, I then put this in my wash bin and I get another stippler. So if you're doing a big carnival, you want to buy a lot of these little finger daubers. And then you can wash, sanitize them, soak them in rubbing alcohol, put them out in the UV light, and they may be stained, but they're going to be germ-free for the next event. I'm going to now show you, you could do the same thing with this round sponge, or you could do it with this one. Now, the more holes, the more water it can absorb. So you want to, again, be very careful. A little bit of, I just oversprayed and got my pirate girl wet. So I need to let her dry. So I'm going to wave it in the air. And while it's drying, I'm going to take this sponge and I'm going to pick up some color. Did you see that? It was sitting on the white paint and the water soaked up from the paint and the sponge kind of glued itself. All right, to your hand, test it. You want it thick but not wet. If it's very thick, it'll still bleed under your stencil. Okay, she is still drying, but I think this corner here is dry enough. This area is wet. I wanted to play around and put some little skulls here. Now I'm going to push down and up. And if you did it right, when you lift it up, you should get skulls. And if your stencils are not perfect, if there's bleed throughs, just work it into your design. I want to where the knot of the design is, I might want to center a skull. Now you'll notice that when you're stippling now with your sponge, it's starting not to cover all the way. That means you need to get some more paint onto that edge. Spray my sponge. Run it really quickly over my white. Light pressure. But go ahead and have fun. I'm going to show you another stencil. But first I'm going to finish off this design. I have a brush. It has dried green paint on it. But that's all right because I am filling up on black. Black is never truly black. It's usually a very dark green, very dark blue, or a very dark red. But that green color gets eaten and swallowed up by that black. And then you could actually outline, but when you outline a stencil, it can take more time. So if I was doing a 5-minute design, I would go ahead and outline this. But if I'm at a festival and an event and I have 100 kids in line, I would just do a few streaky lines. This is where your face paint and line practice will come in handy. Put in those wrinkles, do a circle, do a squiggle down. Festivals, you have to work fast. But check that out. A few stencils, well-placed stencils on your sponged on split cake color can do wonders. And then you can always get a corner of your sponge or get a cleaning rag and you can just maybe clean up one of the edges. Or look, your hand was dirty and you touched their chin. Just take your rag and give that a little wipe. You can always clean up the design on the edges. So this is how you would apply sponges to accent your designs. But what if you're painting with nothing but stencils? This is where I'm going to get my board and show you. Check out this beautiful stencil. It's a mermaid crown. So I would take my stencil and then I would choose a color. Let's see, what color do I want? What if you don't have a split cake? Many face painters don't, and they get creative with their sponges. Say they want to pick up a little bit of white. They always pick up the light color first, then a medium, and then a dark on different areas of the sponge. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of white on that part of the sponge. I'm going to pick up some pink on that part, and I'm going to pick up some red. Now I have 3 colors on one sponge. And then I go to the face, and then I'm going to go swoop, just like that. Just enough to put color on their face. Or what if it's on their cheek? On their cheek, I would go around the eye to the cheek there. And then I would let that dry. All right, I put on this color. I want it to dry faster. I have a fan. I unfold my fan and I fan my design. I always have a collapsible fan in my face paint kit in case I need to dry a design quickly. I don't need to worry about plugging it in or if it has good batteries. And they can be pretty and colorful. The one I keep in my face paint kit is actually a pink and gold, so it's shiny. This is a paper fan that was given to me as a gift when they visited China. Just beautiful, beautiful work. So you don't want to carry your best fan with you to your events. I can see just these edges here are still wet. As you get better, the less water you're able to work with, the faster the design dries, the more you're able to do stuff with it. It's still a little wet on the corners, but we're going to stop there. I'm going to put my fan to the side. We're going to use this crown stencil. There are stencils that are made to cover the whole face because there are people out there that are not comfortable with brushes. And stencils can be very quick. So you would do this over a child's forehead. You would lay this stencil on their forehead, and then you're going to get your stipple brush. Need to get, let's see, where is, I may have to get another one. 1, 2, 3, 5. I got a finger stipple sponge, a pack of 40, and trust me, you're going to use them. You just are. I'm going to take my big kit, and we're going to pick up some white paint. The more back and forth you can go, the more paint you can pick up. It's a big design, so we're going to need more paint. So we're going to have to make sure we get lots of paint on it. You can see that this paint is wet but very dry. When I pick it up, you can see the impressions of the sponge in the paint. So that's very loaded up with white. These large stencils are also really good if you are doing airbrush there's airbrush face paints, but that just involves more equipment and more cleaning. So trust me, when you're charging $65 an hour, that is not enough if you are using equipment that you have to take apart and clean, because it's not just the cost of the paint or your time painting it on, it's all the time before and after the party. For 1 hour of party work, you're usually doing 3 hours of work behind the scenes. So I'm stippling just up and down. You can go light at first just to make sure there's some coverage everywhere. And different parts of the sponge will get dry and some are not used enough. You also don't want to jam it down on the child's face too heavy. You don't want their head going back and forth like a jackhammer as you're trying to get enough paint out of the sponge. But we're just practicing. When you're practicing, the board does not care. The board just helps you get control of the technique, how much pressure to how much water. Now, when you're painting on skin, that skin's going to flex. That's another element. So when we lift this stencil off, there you go. There are some stencils of stars. Maybe on the cheeks, I want to stipple some stars. I need to pick up some more paint. Oh, this one's really wet. So I'm going to use a very light pressure. and hope I don't have too much overbleed. There you go. So a splash of color on the cheek, let it dry, a little bit of stencil, and you don't have to worry about your brush. It's right there. And what if I want to add some stars to this design up here? If this stencil has already, what you've painted on here has dried, you can lay it down, still pull some stars there. I just want to use the little star there and there. You can combine stencils. And there you go. Your princess is all ready to go out and finish partying. She has color. She has the stencil design. And then you can, any areas that you have flaws, when your paint is still wet, you can spray glitter on and glitter will stick to that design. Glitter covers up a lot of flaws. And stencils make face paint possible. If you're not good at face painting with your brush, maybe stencils is the way to go. So get some fun different stencils. They make practicing a lot more fun. You can see that one was too wet. Try it again with a lighter pressure. Sometimes, if it bleeds underneath too much, you may want to dry that off and then put it down and try again. You will start getting the feel of this. And the reason why you practice is so when you do it, it works the way you're supposed to. Here's a fun stencil, Clockworks. And then sometimes you may get a really fun stencil, but when you put it on, it doesn't go, you're not happy with how it looks. This is a huge coverage one. I won I won first place in a speed face painting contest using this stencil. We were doing a boy design and we had 10 minutes in order to come up with the boy design. So I laid down the color, I stenciled on in white these gears, and then I just did a few accent lines and called it done. And it wowed ladies. They liked how I applied my knowledge. What if you're doing a superhero? Getting these dot patterns are great for adding to your design. I'm going to paint here on top of this paint here. I'm going to bring the camera down just a little bit. Flip the board around. If you're painting a superhero and you use your finger dauber to pounce on some dots, that makes your superhero look like it came out of a comic book. Or if you want to add a really fun dimension, this is great for Spider-Man. There's another way to apply stencil work to your art is by taking the finger dauber and instead of pouncing up and down, just drag it across. Rub it. If your paint is dry, rubbing it will work good. Check that out. So you can push it, make sure it's dry, you can push it, or if it's very dry, you can rub it to get a thicker coverage. So check the difference. I'll do it again on my hand here. Pouncing was spotty, but if I rub it, it gave me full coverage. Which one shall I do next? Let's see, I haven't counted all of my stencils. I have at least 30 stencils, maybe more. I like using this design when I'm doing kitty cats. Stippling over there, and I'm just going to pull it back and forth here. Now when you're pulling back and forth, your stencils do have a sharp edge and they can tear up and eat your stencil. No, they'll tear and eat up your sponge. Check that out. You can see where I stippled it by pushing up and down. That had overbleed or underbleed. But the stencil that I pulled the sponge across is more full coverage. It's fainter, but it's even and it's there. Now I'm going to see, where's my dragon? Some of you might get excited with the dragon. I know I was. My daughter loves dragons. But I've never been happy with how my dragon has turned out. It could be just the stencil, nice stencil, looks good, applies bad, or maybe I just don't use it the right way. Sometimes your stencil's going to have sharp edges that come up, like here where the feet meet. If I rub this way, that's going to bend up. So I want to pull my sponge or carefully stipple it the direction that the sticking out piece is laying. So you want to be very careful about dragging. You can drag it in little short bursts. Here's some pieces that can bend up. That piece is bending up. So I'm going to carefully go down and go the direction that that piece is pointing up in. When you think you have everything all covered up, then we can lift it, and there's the dragon. It's a little bit there. Just practice. In practicing your face paint, go ahead and use the colors that you don't like for your practice. Double dragon, we got dragon trouble. Dragons are coming out of the woodwork. Or maybe I'm only going to use the head of the dragon. Let's try the head of the dragon. Just constantly practice it, dragging lightly, just very light pressure. You'll either get better or it just never works. And some are just fun. Look, you could use a sponge with 2 colors on it. This sponge is still a little wet. I'm going to see if I can pick up a little bit of white and orange on it. And then using the 2 tones, I just go over and I stipple. Stipple is the action of pushing a brush or a sponge up and down. I could do a dark color. It's always best to put the paint on dark and then stipple with a lighter color. It stands out more. And stippling, I got overbleed. So let me just pull it across. Sometimes pulling it across will give you a better effect. Now, this is a word of caution. If you do have underbleed, before you try it again, make sure you dry and wipe off the paint underneath. When working with sponges, your hands will get messy. Always use the back of your hand to test how it's doing. So it's always important before you face paint someone, make sure that you've cleaned your hands in between people. And make sure you're always starting out with clean skin before you do the next child. Have a lot of fun with your stencils. Remember, practice your brush strokes daily. Brush strokes add wonderful accents, and stencils accent your paint. You will get paint under your nails. You'll get paint everywhere. A lot of people like to wear black clothing. Face painters. Face painters wear black a lot because the colors don't rub off on their clothes and show up enough. Me, I'm crazy. I like to wear white, even when I'm face painting. I just like the look of the white. But it's kind of like, you can see I think I got a, is that a splash of color? Nope, that's just the buttonhole. You know you're painting good if you're not, don't get it on your clothes. Just like a chef or a cook, they wear all white, and the sign of a good chef is their white outfit is still white at the end of their cooking. So there you go. Get some sponges, get some finger sponges, finger daubers, get some stencils, and have fun.